it was refreshing. And then everybody started talking about it, and we went back and looked at a couple more films, and then
You thought Clint Eastwood was calm, wise, untouchable, but you were wrong. At 95, the legend finally dropped his mask, revealing a side darker than anyone ever imagined. He's naming 6 stars who betrayed him when he needed them most. They stood beside him in fame, in glory, and then stabbed him in the back. And once you hear their names, you'll understand why Clint Eastwood never forgave and never forgot. Number 1. Leonardo DiCaprio. The Golden Boy. Clint Eastwood never forgave. What could possibly make Clint Eastwood walk off his own movie set? The answer is Leonardo DiCaprio. When J. Edgar started filming in 2010, everyone thought it was a dream pairing. Hollywood's calmest director and its most intense actor. But insiders say it turned into a quiet nightmare. From day one, DiCaprio showed up with folders of notes, pages of historical research, even marked up FBI memos. Crew members said Clint's patience evaporated fast. "He came in like a detective trying to solve me," Clint supposedly joked once, and I wasn't the case. Behind the humor was irritation, and it was growing. Then came the breaking point, the emotional breakdown scene. Leo nailed it in one take. Raw, real, flawless. The room froze. Clint murmured, "Perfect." Cut. But Leo wanted another. And another. By the 6th, Clint wasn't behind the camera anymore. He was leaning on the craft table, coffee in hand, stone-faced. Someone asked if he was okay. He just muttered, "He's still searching for something I already found." When filming wrapped, there was just silence. Clint's kind of silence. Casting meetings after that went the same way. DiCaprio's name appeared. Clint shook his head. "Great actor," he'd say, "but not my kind." They've never reunited, never shared a stage, never exchanged a word since. Leo got his Oscar years later, but never another Eastwood call. Because to Clint, perfection isn't about doing it again. It's about doing it once and never wasting another second. Number 2. Michael Moore, the man who pushed Clint too far. The moment Michael Moore compared Clint Eastwood's American Sniper to Nazi propaganda, he might as well have pulled the trigger on a friendship that never existed. Clint stood there yet didn't yell. He just froze him out. Forever. It wasn't their first clash. The tension had been simmering since 2005, when Eastwood stood on stage at the National Board of Review Awards and growled, "If Michael Moore ever shows up at my door with a camera, I'll kill him." The room laughed nervously. Clint didn't. He stared straight ahead and walked off stage. That wasn't a joke. It was a line in the sand. To understand The Grudge, you have to know what Clint stands for. Discipline, quiet service, old-school honor. Moore's documentaries, especially Fahrenheit 9/11, struck him as grandstanding, politics disguised as art. "He sees soldiers as pawns. I see them as heroes," Eastwood once said in a rare outburst to a friend. It was about respect. Then, almost a decade later, Moore mocked American Sniper online, writing that it reminded him of the Nazi sniper movie in Inglourious Bastards. He insisted it was just a joke, but Clint's people said he was livid. "He doesn't forget insults," one longtime collaborator explained. "He deletes them." And that's exactly what he did. Since that tweet, Moore's name has been out of Clint's orbit. Eastwood has worked with liberals and conservatives, but he draws the line at anyone who mocks soldiers. To him, Moore didn't just cross it, he spit on it. Today, if you mention Michael Moore in Clint's presence, the conversation ends. Number 3. Barbra Streisand, the perfectionist who provoked the cowboy. If there's one name that makes Clint Eastwood's jaw tighten even after 9 decades in Hollywood, it's Barbra Streisand. She's the one who got under his skin so deeply that he still refuses to say her name in interviews. And their feud become one of Hollywood's coldest wars. It started in the early 1980s when both were turning from actors into directors. Streisand was the queen of control. 40, 50, sometimes 60 takes just to capture one expression. Clint worked the opposite way. 2 takes max, then move on. He'd been known to say, "If it's not real the first time, it's not worth filming." To him, Barbara represented everything wrong with the new Hollywood: control, vanity, and endless overthinking. By the early 90s, their creative philosophies had turned into open contempt. When The Prince of Tides failed to get Streisand a Best Director nomination in 1992, Eastwood was overheard telling a friend, maybe if she made decisions faster, she'd finish more than 3 films in 15 years. It spread through the industry like wildfire. Then came The Bridges of Madison County, the project that broke whatever fragile peace remained. Streisand had been attached to direct it, but dropped out after years of indecision. Eastwood swooped in, rewrote the script, and delivered a quiet, emotional masterpiece. It won Meryl Streep an Oscar nomination, and Clint his revenge without saying a word. Since then, they've avoided each other completely. For Clint, she became the symbol of everything he despised in filmmaking: hesitation, control, and the death of instinct. In his code, you pull the trigger once, not 50 times. Number 4, Tommy Lee Jones. The alpha Clint couldn't tame. The first day, Tommy Lee Jones walked onto the set of In the Line of Fire. In 1993, Clint Eastwood supposedly leaned over to a crew member and muttered, "2 bulls in 1 pen. This won't last." He was right. At first, everyone thought they'd be perfect together, but behind the camera, it was a duel. Jones wasn't the type to take quiet direction. He barked, argued, rewrote lines, and kept performing long after the word cut. Clint, who ran his sets calmly, efficiently, silently, watched in disbelief. He'd stay in character between takes, one technician recalled. Clint would just stare like, "What are you doing?" The tension hit its peak during a heated confrontation scene. Jones towered over Clint, fully in character, spitting every line with venom. The director yelled, "Cut!" But Jones kept going, glaring straight into Eastwood's eyes. The crew froze. After a long pause, Clint whispered to his assistant, "Life's too short for that kind of theater." Then he walked off set. From that moment, the decision was made. When casting directors later suggested Jones for Eastwood's future projects, Clint didn't hesitate. "He's a great actor," he'd say, "but we don't speak the same language." Translation: never again. They've never reunited, never shared a panel, never even mentioned each other in interviews. In Eastwood's eyes, there's only room for one alpha, and he's the one calling cut. Number 5. Richard Burton, the drunk who pushed Clint's patience to the edge. Clint Eastwood doesn't lose his temper easily, but Richard Burton came dangerously close to making it happen. On the 1968 set of Where Eagles Dare, the tension wasn't about ego or fame. It was about work ethic. Burton showed up late, slurred his lines, and sometimes smelled like the night before. Clint, already dressed and ready at dawn, just stood there watching him stumble through take after take. One crew member swore you could see the respect draining from Clint's face like water. Burton was in the middle of his stormy marriage to Elizabeth Taylor, and every night seemed to end in a bar. Every morning, the crew paid for it. Clint didn't yell or lecture. He waited, cold, silent, and increasingly disgusted. After Burton blew the same line for the 10th time, Clint supposedly muttered, "I'm getting paid by the picture, not by the hour." The crew laughed nervously, but Burton didn't. The message landed. The final straw came when Burton was overheard calling the movie a paycheck job. To Eastwood, that was a slap in the face. He believed every film deserved full commitment, even an action flick. Years later, when asked about Burton, Clint didn't bother sugarcoating it. Talented guy. Wasted talent. That was all he said, and all he ever needed to say. The film became a hit, but their relationship died on set. Clint never worked with him again, never spoke about him again. For a man who believes silence is the sharpest weapon, Burton's fate was sealed. That's unforgivable. Number 6. Jean Seberg, the woman who broke Clint's patience. Clint Eastwood doesn't talk about Paint Your Wagon anymore, and if you ask why, the answer is Jean Seberg. She wasn't just his co-star in the 1969 musical, she was the reason he swore he'd never mix sympathy with work again. Seberg was fragile, unpredictable, and already under FBI surveillance for her political activism. On set, her emotions were everywhere. One day, she'd charm the crew with a smile. The next, she'd lock herself in her trailer for hours. Clint was the opposite. Focused, punctual, allergic to drama. By week 3, he'd had enough. She'd stop mid-scene to ask about her motivation, a script supervisor remembered. Clint would just stare at the floor, waiting for her to finish. You could see him dying inside. The real fallout came later. When Paint Your Wagon bombed, Seberg told reporters that Clint's wooden performance dragged the movie down. To him, that was betrayal of the worst kind, criticizing a colleague publicly after he'd spent months trying to hold the production together. From that moment, she was done. He never mentioned her name again. If anyone brought her up, he'd change the subject, light a cigar, and walk away. Years later, when news broke of Seberg's tragic death in 1979, Clint stayed silent. Friends say he looked genuinely sad, but he never softened. "Some people aren't cut out for the work," he once said quietly, "and I don't need to deal with it twice." That's as close as he's ever come to forgiveness. So what do you think? Was Clint Eastwood right to cut them out of his life, or did his silence go too far? Tell us what you believe in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more untold Hollywood stories that were never meant to see the light.